What's happening, everybody? Jeremy Lord here, and welcome to another illustration tutorial. Today's video is part of a series of 4 tutorials centered around digital inking and how to do it in various programs, starting with Photoshop. This is something that's very near and dear to my heart and something I spend a lot of time doing. I'm pretty excited about this tutorial, so without further ado, let's get stuck into it. So we're kicking off the series with Photoshop. This Photoshop is not necessarily the best program for inking. It's really solid, but it's where I spend most of my time doing colors, so I generally tend to do a fair bit of inking in Photoshop as well. But we've got this basic digital sketch here. As you can see, I've done a bunch of different layers. I usually like to play around a little bit with different kind of ideas when I'm doing this. It's always important to kind of name your layers when you're doing it, but I put them all into a group so that I can then drop the opacity of all of them together, create a new layer, name this one OTL. That's just my kind of naming of this. It just stands for outline in my brain. Not everybody uses the same kind of things. You just use whatever you're comfortable with, I guess. But yeah, so we're basically ready to start inking up. So I'm put on my little smudge guard here. This weird little kind of 3-2 finger glove. You might have seen artists with these before. They're called a smudge guard, just so that I can kind of slide around the Wacom without my hand gripping. Hand gets a bit clammy and sweaty, especially here in Sydney in the summers. It gets a bit shitty and very humid. So nice to kind of be able to move freely around your Wacom or Cintiq, whatever you're using. So I'm ready to start inking up now. And the first thing, I guess, the most important thing is what kind of brush you're using. So I'm not necessarily a huge fan of, spending a lot of time creating these crazy brushes. I'm generally of that kind of school of, if you can't do it with the round edge brush, maybe you shouldn't be doing it at all. I think fancy brushes don't necessarily make or break you. They're not going to save you if your artwork is not up to scratch. So I generally tend to mess around with very basic brushes and not do too much to them. That being said, I am using a downloaded brush here called Carl's Manga Smoothie. So this is part of a pack of brushes that you can get if you have a subscription to Creative Cloud. You can click here and go to Get More Brushes, and that will take you to this website where you'll find a whole bunch of different brushes and brush packs, all made by Carl T. Webster, who is a bit of a kind of a brush expert, or is a lot of a brush expert actually. And the one I'm kind of using here is part of this pack here. So you click download. They're really easy to install. You literally just double click on them and they get set up into your brushes straight away. And they get added into here. So you can see here I've gotten the dry media one. They're part of a few different ones that I've gotten, and I've dragged these brushes out up here because I use them quite a bit. So I'm using Carl's Manga Smoothie. So let's have a look at some of the settings that we've got straight out of the door when we're using this. So our basic settings, and I've done a video where you can kind of look at basic settings of brushes, so I won't go into that right now. I'll pop the link in the description below there so you can watch that if you haven't already. We've got our basic kind of pressure sensitivity. We've got a tapered edge, which is exactly what we're looking for in a nice kind of clean inking brush. We can do these kind of strokes here. This is again where Photoshop gets a little bit kind of crunky, gets this weird thing where the system doesn't necessarily work super well on the low ends of the pressure spectrum. Again, I'll do a series of videos around which program I prefer to work in for these reasons, but Photoshop, if you kind of know what you're doing, can work super well. So I actually tinker with a couple of settings here. First thing I'm going to do is get rid of buildup. So if you look up here, we've got the kind of the airbrushing thing. We don't need that. That's kind of chewing up a little bit more program space, if you will, and it's potentially going to do some weird things when we're kind of working around that as well. But otherwise, I generally tend to leave it all the same, and I just turn on smoothing. This is me. How far you turn your smoothing on really just depends on the kind of style that you're going for. I usually have it hovering around sort of 30 to 40, and that just gives me a little bit more kind of cleanliness to my line. And that's really essentially it. That's kind of the brush that I use almost all of the time. You can get something very similar with your basic round edge brush as well, but I would seriously recommend Carl's Manga Smoothie for something like this. And so now I'm basically ready to go. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to take note of the brush size that I'm using. So I'm just going to do a little test here to see if I'm comfortable with how thick this line is, and how it all kind of looks when I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit and doing these kind of different things. Something I'm pretty happy with that, I guess. That's looking pretty good. Again, you know, you could go for a different style and get these really thick black outlines if you're going for something a little bit more kind of, I guess, I don't know what you would call this, but manga doesn't generally use these kind of super thick outlines, so something to kind of think about for you guys. But the reason I have a look at that is sometimes I'll kind of vary the line if I'm doing slight details, and I need to know what line I was at so that I've got a nice kind of clean and homogeneous line when I'm doing this, so there's not really like huge variations in thickness, even though there will be some little ones. So yeah, so let's get right into this. As you can see, I've got a fair bit of detail happening here, so I kind of know what I'm doing. It's pretty typical that I will tend to skip ahead when I'm doing the sketch phase. Like I've kind of cheated a little bit and done something that's really clean for this particular tutorial, but there is definitely a lot of times where I will just get impatient and just jump ahead because I want to see what the thing is going to look like in one go. Yeah, not something that I would generally recommend doing, because when you get to this inking phase, it just means that you're like, shit, what do I do here? And trying to draw it all out when you're inking is not necessarily a great thing to have to do. I've zoomed out here, as you can see, because I tend to avoid doing this, and I think this is something that you should think about as well with inking, is you don't want to do lots of strokes like this. You can if you want to, and there are artists who will do this, and there's nothing technically wrong with that, but for what I like to do, trying to get these kind of nice, clean, smooth lines, I'll tend to try and get the line down in one go, which may take me more than a couple of goes at times, but it just means that I've got a nice, clean, solid, even line, and I can come back and edit that a little bit later on. So you see here, I've kind of messed up. I haven't gotten quite the right angle on that horn. That is maybe just me being a little bit too choosy and picky with this. It's probably fine as it is, but yeah, I like nice, clean, smooth lines, so that's what I do. Cool, that's pretty good. Alright, so get the hair in. I'll speed this up in a sec, but I just wanted to show you guys a couple of things before I do that. So again, don't feel like you need to kind of stick exactly to the sketch that you've done. It's not always the best kind of way to do this, but the sketch is just there to help you not have to make it all up as you go when you're inking. Alright, so here's something that's is kind of the first little bit of a challenge here. Let's get these bangs in before we do that. Alright. Okay. So trying to get the nice kind of clean, even line of her kind of geisha hairdo in this particular spot might be tricky, because I've got these lines that are going through it, all these kind of hair decorations that go through it. And if I was to try and do something like this, and then start the next one and the next one, it's not really as clean of a flow as if you're doing it in one solid line. So I'll ignore that for now and do something like this. And again, this is my way of doing it. It's not necessarily the way of doing it, but it's just whatever works for me. So as you can see, I'm doing this line over and over again just because I need to get the exact curve of it right, and something that I will again spend a fair bit of time doing, making sure that all these things kind of line up properly. Okay, get a few more little kind of details happening in here. Right, so what I'll do now, in order to kind of preserve this and get it right, I'll actually just switch to a different color, something that's going to really stand out a little bit more on here. So maybe like, yeah, green will do nicely. And I'm not going to label this layer just yet because it doesn't really matter right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw in these shapes in here, and then I can go over the next layer and mask them out. So here we go. I'm actually going to use my mouse to do this, and I'm holding down shift. I click, hold down shift, and click again, and you get these kind of straight lines with no variation in thickness. It's a nice, easy, simple way to get straight lines. If you do this with a Wacom, you'll see that this is what's going to happen. You're going to do this and then hold down shift, and because I've got these settings here in my brush and it's on shape dynamics where it tapers off, it's going to imagine that you've done like the smoothest gradual stroke in the universe, and you get this really kind of clean taper there, which can have its uses, but in this scenario it's probably just better if I use my mouse and then just click, bang, bang, and then I can just keep doing that for the other one. So you probably get where I'm going with this now, where this is going over that line, and I don't need to be too clean, like that's obviously all messed up in there, but for now that's all good. And then literally what I can do is either I can put a layer mask on this and start kind of editing that out so that we've got, whoops, using white, not black, here we go. Or I can just erase it if I'm feeling pretty confident that that's what's going to happen, which is probably going to be the case in this particular scenario. But yeah, essentially just getting those lines down right. And now I can lock the transparency on that layer, go back to my black, fill, and then I can either merge these two layers, which obviously I will lose my layer mask if I do that, but that's a nice, quick, easy way. And oops, shit, didn't do all of it. Let me undo that. There we go. So it's just a good, easy way, like I said, to get all your work nice and clean without having to kind of erase too many things and worry too much about things lining up properly and so on and so forth. So again, that's what I do. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what everybody else will do, but it's just what works for me. Cool, so I'll speed things up a little bit and ink up the rest of this on a time lapse from now on. Okay, so we've done a fair bit of inking now, and we can kind of still keep going on and on with this, and I will do the whole thing as part of this time lapse as well, so you can see kind of the finished products in the end. But I just want to cover a couple more things here. So first things first is, you saw me potentially doing stuff where on the eye, for instance, when I was kind of drawing the eyelash, and I want to get a really nice kind of pointy feeling to it. Sometimes Photoshop cooperates and you get this nice kind of clean, super sharp kind of point there. Other times you won't, and you'll get something a little bit kind of blobby and shit like this. So you'll see me come in with my eraser, and my eraser is also on smoothing up here, as you can see, so like around sort of 20-25. And I'll have to do what's called cutting back, which is coming back in on top of this and really sharpening it out, just kind of cutting off on the edge to really get, again, that really kind of nice, clean, pointy line there. So you'll see a fair bit of that happening as I go, depending on how sharp I need that line to be, especially around the eyes. That's going to be really crucial because you want that kind of super crisp sharpness around that to really kind of work out for you. So definitely something to think about there as well, and doing some cutting back. The other thing that I wanted to show you guys is, I haven't done this in the sketch here, but often what you'll see as part of kind of geishas hairdos is these little kind of hair decorations that you'll see that are kind of hanging from the flowers in the hair and all sorts of like geishas. It's one of the reasons why I like to draw them so much, is there's just so much happening up there, so much tradition, so many kind of little bits and pieces that you can change or use to make, you know, all of these can be a bunch of Star Wars references if I want, so they don't have to be these little folded pieces of paper, which is technically what they are. They're just kind of folded up, if you will, and made into like almost like a little like triangle kako, I guess. Sorry, anybody who's Japanese or Mexican for that matter out there. But drawing them, because there's so much detail, drawing them can be a royal pain in the ass. And so having to, again, I would do this on a different layer, because forget having to do that in here and try and sort of erase around all of that. So it can be a little bit of annoying to do this kind of stuff. So what I would generally do is I would use or create a brush in this particular instance for these. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So I'm going to just draw on a separate layer so I can isolate it. I'm going to draw one series of these kind of little decorations there. Get that fold in as well. So maybe I'm happy with this, maybe not so much. Again, let's maybe do that one again. That's probably a little bit better. Yeah, that's heaps better. Right, so now what I can do is I can just literally go into my brush presets here and say, where are you hiding? You never need these, you never get these when you need them, do you? We need to make a selection first. That is why. Define brush preset. Call this one Kanzashi 1. Kanzashi is just the general term for geisha's hair decorations, and we can get rid of that. And so I've got my my thing here, my brush size. But what I want to do, obviously, if I start painting with this is going to look like shit. It's not going to work. And again, I've done a tutorial on sort of brush creation, but you can kind of have a look at this if you want to here. So I'm just increasing the spacing, increasing the rotation. I'm just going to reduce that down in the preview so that we have got a connection there. So that's all good. But again, I might want some kind of flow here, so having it kind of do this as soon as I go around is not super useful either. So all I need to do is go into my shape dynamics and go angle control and go direction, and that's going to give me something a lot easier to work with. Now I'm a bit of an idiot, and I've actually put this on a on the side angle here for this one, but basically you'll see what I mean here. If I draw these, they'll all kind of look in line. You get a little bit discrepancies where there's really kind of rough angles like this. It'll kind of break them, but fortunately we're not going to really see that happening too much in here. So here we go. Now I can start up here and just draw one, and I'll maybe draw another one on a separate layer in a different color, like that. And so they've got different colors so that I can kind of see what's what again. And so go back to my brush settings, get rid of build up, go into smoothing, just basically resetting all my brushes and their settings here. And so just going to move this over a little bit so we got a little bit more kind of volume. And now I'm going to put the black one behind the red one. There we go. Drop that down. Merge these two together. Turn this guy back on. You're hiding behind there. Actually, I think I need to make this a bit lighter again. Okay, so the different color again is so that I can see what's actually part of the drawing and what I'm erasing and what I need to do here. Something that can get a little bit confusing if it's all just black. Not super helpful. So again, this is a bit of a cheat. But you know, digital programs allow you to do these things, so why not use them? And creating brushes, like I said, I don't mess around with too many brushes and brush settings, but there are instances where having a custom brush for a very specific thing, again, like this would only be really useful in this exact scenario where I'm drawing a geisha and I need to draw these kind of hair decorations. But it can save you a little bit of time if you need to, and nobody will be any the wiser. So yeah, that's just a kind of another little tip for you guys. So I'll resume my time lapse. Okay, so I'm going to pause again and just take a look at another little kind of trick that I use when I'm inking like this. And again, you know, might kind of call this cheating, but it's just using what the program gives you, and that is kind of drawing these perfect circles or perfect ellipses. Ellipses and circles, obviously circles are virtually impossible. Ellipses can be really tricky if you don't do them fast, and if you do them fast then you're not doing them necessarily with a huge amount of control. So what I tend to use is my Ellipse tool here. So obviously holding down Shift gives me a perfect circle. I'm going to say no fill, and I'm going to give it a stroke that's going to try and sort of match the thickness that I have created in my outline here. That's pretty close. There we go. And I'm just going to duplicate that for further reference. And then I can bring this in to here, and I've got my perfect circle, and I'll make another one like so. Make this maybe just a little bit smaller. Nice thing about these smart objects is, or vector objects, is that they'll maintain the same thickness of stroke regardless of whether you make them smaller or bigger, so that's always a nice thing. Next thing I want to know, obviously these are vector objects, I want to be able to erase and paint them, so I'm going to rasterize and rasterize. And which one have we got? We got this one, so I'm going to erase right here. There we go. And I can now smash these two together. Put that down here. Erase that, and we can kind of continue. Now the reason I've made another one here is this obviously going to be handy for ellipses. So ellipses, if you hold down Shift, we can, like, let's say it's not part of this illustration, but let's say that I wanted to give us some like diva hoops. I could put that in there, put another one over there. So it's all like, this is just a really nice way to get nice, super clean outlines. I can also make a copy of that one if I want to get it thick on the inside and on the outside. So like that, for instance, that's always kind of a nice way to get things like, for instance, like trying to get these guys nice and clean, I would definitely use that kind of technique. So yeah, just a quick little interruption. I will resume my time lapse. That's it for part 1 of this 4-part series on digital inking. Make sure you guys tune in to the other 3 parts coming soon. Until then, take care and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.